Hello, hello. Happy Tuesday. We are going live today on a very important topic of layoffs. And we are discussing how Black women have been disproportionately affected by these layoffs with Lexi Butler. And before I introduce her and bring her on stage, I just wanted to, um, lay the land a little bit. In 2023, mass layoffs have impacted women across the board. And according to layoffs.fyi, there have been close to 200,000 workers laid off so far in 788 tech companies, with more to come. And even as recent as this morning, announcement coming out of Singapore, their Uber-like Grab app let go of 1,000 employees, roughly 11% of their workforce. And during this economic uncertainty, racial minorities and women are some of the most vulnerable in the labor market. And it has already been seen that these underrepresented communities are a large part of these layoffs. And it's also more difficult sometimes for these communities to get back on their feet, to find the new roles in the new companies. And so I've invited Lexi Butler to join me in a discussion around these layoffs, some of the things that we are seeing, some of the trends, some of the things that women of color can do to navigate the layoffs and getting back into the workforce and getting back onto the job search. So a little bit about Lexi. Alexandria Butler, aka Lexi B, is a self-proclaimed freedom fighter and leader in building executive leadership and workplace equity in the tech industry. After several years of working in some of the biggest tech companies in Silicon Valley, Butler founded the Black Women in Tech Sista Circle. And initially, it was a way for other Black women to connect in the tech industry, as they make up less than 3% of the tech workforce. Today, the community has 15,000 members and is a global online community sharing insights, challenges, tips, and opportunities. And so without further ado, I'd love to invite Lexi to join the stage with me today. Thank you for being here. You are on mute, my friend.
Sorry, thank you.
There you go. No problem.
I'm so excited to be here off mute, but yes.
Amazing. Well, we had a little bit of a preamble already, so we're going to get stuck into that conversation. But first of all, I would love for you to introduce yourself, share some more details about yourself and your work. And I'd love to hear more about Sista Circle, Black Women in Tech, 15,000 members. Do tell. I would love to hear about these women and how they connect.
Yeah, they're phenomenal women. Black women are phenomenal, magical beings that should be praised a lot more than they are. So I have been in tech my whole career. I accidentally stumbled upon it after college graduation, and I've been here since. I've worked at some of the largest companies. I define the word large not necessarily by size, but by brand name. In my whole career, what I really focus on is just getting things done. I do a lot of operations work. I'm the person working with the engineers and other people at the company just to make sure that things get done that need to be done. Whether it's building a product, whether it's putting a product into the market, it can be simple things as things are happening in the news and we need some crisis management. How do we respond to certain things? I very much enjoy my job. I love working with different people around the business, learning about all the parts of the business and how we all come together in a lot of cross-functional work. But very early on in my career, it was very clear to me that I was the only person that looked like me or identified me in the room. And I think it's very important to have people around you that can identify similarly to you because one, you can't be what you can't see. And as a 22-year-old, a long, long time ago, I did not really see myself in leadership. And the few Black women at the company that I was at, they were in different parts of the business that I personally didn't really have an interest in. So the few times that I saw myself in a leadership position, it was like, well, that she's there, but we do different things. So she can help me get to my next steps, but only to a certain extent because she's not in my specialty. And what happened was that as I started moving jobs and transitioning and getting higher in my career, there were questions and mentorship that I needed to make it to the next step. So one day I just started a Facebook group and I asked a few friends of mine to join. I said, let's go have brunch because I have all these questions for other Black women of how to navigate certain things that did not feel comfortable talking to white peers, and or B, the ones that I did feel comfortable about, their solutioning was not going to work on me. Right? It's like trying a new dress. Just because the dress looks good on you does not mean it's going to look good on me. And so I had some amazing men who happen to be white and men giving me solutioning to how I handle things at work or how they would do certain things. And I knew in my head, I can't do it like that. Because when you do it like that with the armor that you have on in the world, it's going to be received differently than if I do the exact same thing. 100%. So I went searching for Black women to really help me navigate how do I solution certain issues at work that I cannot solution like these white men can solution, but how do I get the same output, get it done, and move my career forward? And so I started this organization, which now has turned into 15,000 plus women all over the world, really supporting each other and just always having these very candid conversations and authentic conversations of how to do certain things at work, how to navigate work situations, how to navigate parental leave. And then obviously, especially with this discussion, how to navigate our current layoff and instability in the workplace.
I love that. And I, 100% agree with this idea of peer mentorship.
Yeah.
We have so much to learn from one another, and being able, what you've done with bringing these women together is really powerful. And we just completed an event, sort of multi-city event tour called Journey to C-Suite, Bringing Diversity to the Top. And it was all around bringing more women of color to C-suite positions. Mm-hmm. And our panelists were mostly women in C-suite, women of color. And the one thing that they kept sort of going back to is what you just said, which is I was the only woman woman of color in the room. I was not, but the tricks that people were telling me, my sponsors or mentors, if they weren't people of color, they had different lived experiences. And so that's, very key, is being able to have that peer mentorship. So, congratulations for bringing that together and getting into this sort of today's topic. Obviously, we don't need to run through the statistics, but we know that women of color are disproportionately affected by these layoffs. Why do you think that is? And what do you think can be done about it? Obviously, that's a two-part question. So let's start with, why do you think that is?
Yeah, I think it is for the same reason why women of color, Black women, people who are not part of the white cisgendered heteronormative framework of identity are always systemically hurt and threatened more in times of uncertainty. It's the same thing. And I think that people don't like when I say this, but it's very true. Like the capitalism in the United States, I would argue the rest of the Western world is built on the colonialism and enslavement attitude that started this whole thing in the have those conversations at work because it makes you uncomfortable, but yet you want to have a conversation about diversity and inclusion. If we're going to build a workplace and a workforce and a capital money system built on the oppression of other people, that will always impact the work that you have. And so I think that number one, to answer your first question, it is having this moment of reckoning, of realizing that the reason why systemically people of color or women are more affected by these layoffs are the same reason why people of color and or women are also systemically affected by all the other bad things that happen in the workplace, right? Yeah. People of color and or women, they usually systemically do not have the network of power that other people do have in the workplace. So when those conversations are being happened at the top about who's getting cut and why, it is systemically true that more likely you are going to save someone who is not a person of color, woman, man, or binary, non-binary, than a person who is, right? When you're having conversations in the room about the people that actually bring the most value to work, the ones that you have decided will somehow sustain this company through hard times, it is systemically not the person who doesn't look like you. And so we really have to own that in order to actually make change.
And I would add, to that, the whole idea of proximity bias. And we know that women and women of color are opting for remote work. And often the reasons behind that are also systemic because of lack of childcare or support or cost of living in certain areas. And so you have this multi-layered effect where I opt for, or somebody opts for that remote work because of these systemic barriers. Additionally, they have proximity bias because they are not in the decision-making room. And I don't know about you, but what I'm noticing in 2023 is that less and less of these important meetings are, made accessible for both people virtually and in person. And so if you're not in the room to advocate for yourself, then guess what? So yeah, I 100% agree.
Yeah, that's real.
So the next question is, what can we do about it? What are some of the things that you think we can do to minimize, in future, how this is affecting women of color?
I think a lot of things, and I think that's twofold. I think the conversation is what can non-people of color do about it and what can people of color do about it,
Yes.
right? And I think I'll start with the people of color piece is that unfortunately, people of color, we have to work 3 times as hard to get what we want. And so what I always tell folks is that it's not about trying to be layoff proof. I have been laid off twice in my life. So it's not about being layoff proof. It's really about having the skills and the network in your pocket that when you are laid off, you can get up faster. That's what people of color need to understand. I think that if we spend so much time trying to be layoff proof, which frankly is not a thing, Heather,
No.
nobody is above a layoff, you are actually spending energy on the wrong time, on the wrong thing. So what you need to do is spend your energy on how are you building a career brand? How are you telling people about your skills? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, did it fall? It didn't. So how do people know that you're great at what you do? And how do you build that network before the layoff? So in the event that you do get cut,
Yeah.
you have options to come back from, right? I think for the non-people of color in the room, I think it's very much about if this layoff is coming. A lot of people don't realize this, but many times senior managers, middle management, they are just as scared as you are. And so when this time comes, they're giving very little information. Okay. And so it's really about looking at what the types of things that you do. And if you're being told there's going to be a layoff and we need, X number of names from you, it's really about being the advocate in the room, being the freedom fighter in the room, and figuring out how your people can be saved. Maybe not by the current work that they're doing, but how do you leverage their talents to say they can also do this work? With every layoff, Heather, comes an opportunity for a company to decide we are no longer going to work on this thing. We're going to prioritize this other thing. And what I constantly tell leaders is that just because you've reprioritized does not mean that these people aren't worthy or valid and cannot do great work. And so what I want to see companies to do, especially now in this instability, is that if they're deciding, hey, we got to make a shift. We got to go left. We can't go right. What does it look like to reassess the talent at your company and say, hey, so we're going to go left. And even though you've been doing this thing over here, how can we leverage your phenomenal transferable skills in order to move it that way?
Yes. And you touched on something that I want to take in a slightly different direction, which is this opportunity.
Yeah.
Is like looking at layoffs as an opportunity. It's an opportunity maybe for the company, but it's also an opportunity for the person who's affected by it.
Yeah.
And one of the trends that I love seeing is, and this is more, I'd say, a newer trend, is this outreach pouring out from people who are still at the company. I have some, connections that are at some of the big tech firms, and they're publishing lists of people who have been affected by the pandemic, not the pandemic, but the layoffs themselves, and they're looking for work. And there's that opportunity, not just for the person who's maybe laid off to take a different direction, but for the people. So I look at it from an entrepreneur perspective. Yeah. There's some really great people on the market now, whereas I was hiring a few years ago And as an entrepreneur, I couldn't keep up, or I couldn't compete with salaries that were, the tech enabled salaries. So let's talk a little bit about that opportunity and how you think women of color can really like capitalize on, if they are in a position that they have been let go.
Yes. So I always tell folks that, like, if you've been laid off, and again, I have been laid off twice, and I am not scared or not too prideful to say that out loud. It's just part of the industry, especially in tech, is that you need to breathe.
Mm.
Really need to breathe. And it's, I think, especially hard for people of color to do that because systemically, if you look at the data, it's people of color that we are the most affected by financial hardship. We are most affected by what does this look like for my finances? And to be very transparent, when a layoff happens, basically you're saying you no longer have a job. When
Mm-hmm.
people read that language or hear that language on the phone, they instantly think, how am I going to pay my bills? I
Mm-hmm.
do want to take an opportunity to say that as soon as you get that next gig, what I would like for you to do, go get a financial advisor. It is much easier to take the weight off of a layoff when it happens, not if, when it happens, when you have your money in a place where if your checks stop today, the first thing you're not thinking about is how are you paying for childcare on Friday and how are you paying for milk and cereal on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I am also very understanding that what I am saying comes from a privileged place, but I always tell people the collective around the world, we need to get our money together. And one of the ways to do that is to find someone who can help you figure that out with the
Mm-hmm.
budget that you have, whether you have 2 pennies or whether you have a million pennies. There are people out there that can you at least start the conversation around what does this look like. And I do want to make that note. I also think for the opportunity is that during a layoff, if you are laid off, or even if you're not laid off, but looking for something different, when you're in this kind of climate, if you know how to sell your transferable skills, you can do something new. This can be a really amazing time for you to try something you've never tried before. But in order to do that, you need to know how to sell yourself. 90% of the skills that you use in your day job, you can actually use them in another day job, doing something completely different, because your magic is not necessarily in the textbook stuff. We can teach people anything. It's in the how in which you do things. And so I do think that during this time, this is a wonderful time to reset and say, hey, have I thought about doing that thing over there? Because this is the time to sell yourself in order to do it and get it done. I'd also like to make the comment that we're in a very interesting, weird recession right now. Usually during recessions, as you know, Heather, it's like we don't have enough jobs and people are laid off.
Yeah.
If you actually look at the statistic, we have people being laid off every day, and we also have the highest number of open jobs in the country. It is the weirdest thing for, I'm sure, any economist ever. And so what
Yeah.
we're actually seeing is we're seeing a lot of people being laid off, and we're also seeing a lot of people saying, I don't want to be treated like that, so I'm not. So we have a lot of people being laid off without jobs, but then we have all these jobs open at the same time. And you
Mm-hmm.
would think that if people were really hungry for work, they would just go take the job.
Yeah.
Don't get it twisted. There are plenty of people who are hungry for work who are actively looking. What I am saying is that it's interesting because the data is showing us that there are a lot of people who are looking for work, but they're being very intentional about that journey, which means that they don't have to tolerate yo-ish if you are bringing it out. They have opportunities to say, I do not want to work for this person. I do not want to work for this company. And that's what the data is actually showing us.
I love that because, you've brought up several nuggets there. And one I want to acknowledge, which is, and agreed, it is a privileged opportunity, but if you can make it work, having a bit of space, to like the emotion. I've also been laid off, and the emotional, it has PTSD attached to it. It really does.
Yes.
There is no shame in saying that it breaks you down. It hurts your ego. There is damage. There is things that you need to heal post layoff, and jumping right into the next opportunity is not always the best way forward. So, and it also doesn't necessarily always set you up for success. So 2008, layoffs, I saw a lot of people kind of jump back into anything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they didn't stay in those roles for very long, and they were not there longer term. They were Band-Aid solutions. So if you do have the time to kind of reassess, I mean, work and the future work has changed so many things. AI is changing so many things. Take an
Mhm.
opportunity to sit back and think, I'm a social media manager. Is this the right role for me moving forward? Do I want to switch things up? Do I need to do training? So that space thing is one thing I want to acknowledge. Um, the other thing, which is interesting, is, as things are changing, there's a lot of narrative around. I follow the work from home, narrative very closely, and, going from where we were in the pandemic to
Yeah.
last year to this year, now they're saying a lot of companies are really going to make that shift and say, no, you have to be at least within close proximity to XYZ city. And you notice the job postings are all remote, but based in, Toronto, as an example. You must be
Mhm.
within certain proximity to come into the office. So many things have shifted there as well. And so doing a personal assessment of what your priorities are you really going to continue to try and find a completely remote work job? Or are you flexible because you would like to start to build your network again? We've been out of the office environment for almost 4 years, it seems. Um, this kind of leads me into my next question, which is, um, as as women of color who are maybe trying to get back into the workforce, what are some recommended ways that you would recommend to rebuild their network or build their network from scratch as they're on the job hunt?
I think that networking is actually the most impactful thing to get a job. People do not hire people unless they have to be very transparent, unless they have to, that they do not know,
Mm-hmm.
especially in this current unstable environment. They want people that they think can get the job done, right? And if I don't know you, I may or may not think that you can get the job done. That's what's actually happening, whether or not people want to admit it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So your network is literally your net worth. I always tell folks you should be networking when you don't need to network. So when you do, it's a simple text message or a phone call, right?
Yeah.
And so to do that, I always say coffee chats go a very, very long way. You need to hit up the people that you know and start revisiting this conversation. What do they do? What do you want to do? It's one thing, Heather, to network with one person, but for example, you and I do
Mm-hmm.
not know who's in your network. So when I'm
Mm-hmm.
calling you to have that coffee chat to catch up, I need to be very intentional about telling you what I want to do. And
Yeah.
what I've seen right now in the space of the layoff is that I'll get hit up on LinkedIn all the time. I really do try to respond to people. I really do my best to schedule things. It may be scheduled out a couple months, but I really do my best to put it on the calendar. And what I'm seeing is people are coming to me and saying, like, I need a job. And I'm like, great. What do you do, or what do you want to do? Silence.
Mm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
not helpful. So I
Yeah.
know this sounds a little counterproductive, but going back to my original point about breathing, there is no point of you networking if you cannot tell people what you want. Because
Well
I can,
said.
I can come to you, Heather, and tell you what I want, and it's very possible that you can't give it to me. It's
Mm-hmm.
also possible you know somebody who can.
Yep.
And so people need to really be intentional. And that intent really starts from what is your narrative? Do not put time on people's calendars unless they're very, very close to you and have a personal relationship with you. If you cannot walk in and say, this is what I need, this is what I want, can you help with that? Or do you have any thoughts to that? Or do you know someone who can?
Totally. And I applaud you for making yourself available to all these people. And, um, you know, that is such good advice, to be concise, because the people who are going to be the most connected are probably some of the busiest people. And if I have 15 minutes to, even if you are scheduled with somebody for a virtual coffee chat, let's say for 30 minutes, I always try to end things early. There is
Mhm.
no, there's, I came from a sales background. And if
Ah,
you can sell something quicker, like the quicker, the better almost. Not always the case when you're, trying to sell yourself. There's the nuances of kind of opening chat and banter. But if
mhm.
you can close a deal or close an ask in 20 minutes in a 30-minute call, that really shows something to the other person on the other line as well. So, yeah, I love that about being kind of upfront, and I think people appreciate the honesty. It's not.
I love it. I love a good small talk, but like I'm very big on, you invited me here. How can I help? And I'm
100%.
not trying to be flippant. I'm not trying to be cold, but it's like the sooner you tell me what you think I can do for you, the sooner that I can tell you I can do that. Or I can say, I can't do that. Or I can say, I know someone who does that. And let me just send that quick email. Right. Because your time is also intrinsically valuable. So I'm just like, how can I help you move your train car to the next step? And if I can't, I'm also good at telling people that I can't because I don't want to waste your time.
100%.
Yeah.
So we're kind of getting close to time. We're going to wrap up in a minute, but I guess just share a little bit more about how people can get in touch with you, how some of the support that you might have within your network, and just, do a little bit of a plug for yourself here.
Yes, so you can find me on LinkedIn, on Lexi B. That's currently live right now. So please feel free to hit me up. I'm currently doing this weekly show called Coffee Chats with Lexi B, because as you can see, I love a good coffee chat, Heather, where I'm bringing leaders around the world who I very much respect to have these very vulnerable conversations on LinkedIn Live Audio. They're every Monday at either 8 a.m. PT or 3 p.m. PT. So follow me on LinkedIn and look out for the schedule. And we're just having once a week conversations about the lessons they have learned in order to get where they are. And what I love about it is it's really kind of become a community of people who continue coming. They get to meet this leader and they get to network with this leader on LinkedIn Audio, because every leader that I bring on is like, please hit me up on LinkedIn, ask me your questions. If you want to get a job at my company, I'll refer you. And so we're really becoming this place of really transformative, candid conversation to grow your career, but also this space where you can network and meet people on your journey and connect together so y'all can support each other.
Amazing. I love that. And LinkedIn is my go-to social platform. Yeah. So I will be tuning in to listen. That's a great initiative. So thank you, Lexi B, for joining me today. I'm, thrilled to be connected with you. I think we're going to have to do a coffee chat.
Let's do it. Let me know.
Let's do it. I'll set it up. So thank you everyone for tuning in, and we hope you have a great week.
Have a great day.